Stay with
The
me now.
Apache woman who healed a cowboy, with her
You're
hands
gonna
on
be
his
all right.
skin.
Just hold on.
The Arizona desert stretched endlessly around him, a mix of dusty red soil, rugged rocks, and sparse green cacti that seemed to watch him silently. He had been riding for hours, checking the fences that ran along the edges of his small cattle ranch. Life had always been hard for Tom, but this week felt heavier than most. Just a few days ago, he had fallen from a stubborn horse that had spooked suddenly, twisting his ankle and leaving a deep gash on his forearm. At first, he had tried to ignore the pain. Cowboys didn't complain about injuries. They got up, dusted themselves off, and went back to work. But the pain in his ankle was sharp, and the wound on his arm was slow to heal. His usual remedies, soap, water, and a rough bandage, were not enough. By now, the swelling in his ankle made each step uncomfortable, and the wound throbbed constantly. Tom guided his horse slowly over the rocky path, gritting his teeth. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. "I can't keep going like this." He remembered what old man Carter, a neighbor who lived a few miles down the road, had said. Carter had been watching him struggle for days. "You need help, Tom," he had called out from his porch one morning. "Medicine alone won't fix you this time. There's a woman, an Apache healer. She might be able to help." Tom had scoffed at first. He didn't believe much in healing hands or ancient remedies. Modern medicine was practical, straightforward, and had rules he could understand. But after 3 nights of tossing and turning in pain, he realized he couldn't keep going the way he was. That afternoon, he rode toward the area Carter had described. It was remote, tucked away near the edge of a small canyon. The land was wild, with dry brush and scattered mesquite trees. Tom could feel the tension in his shoulders easing slightly with each step closer to the place. He told himself it wasn't about belief, it was about survival. As he approached a small clearing, he noticed smoke curling from a thin chimney beside a humble wooden cabin. Around the cabin, the desert seemed calmer, almost quiet, as if the wind itself respected the place. Tom dismounted slowly, carefully resting his injured ankle. The horse nickered softly, sensing his discomfort. From inside the cabin, a figure appeared. She was tall and straight-backed, with long dark hair braided neatly over one shoulder. Her eyes were calm and steady, and when she looked at Tom, there was no judgment, only a quiet, deep understanding. "Hello," she said softly. "You must be Tom." Tom blinked. Her voice had a soothing quality he hadn't expected. Yeah. "That's me," he replied cautiously, feeling awkward and unsure. He was used to speaking to other cowboys or ranch hands, not to someone who seemed so different. "My name is Nahel," she said, holding out her hand. "I hear you need help." Tom hesitated before shaking it. Her grip was firm but gentle, and for a moment he felt a strange warmth that he couldn't explain. He cleared his throat. "I guess I do. My ankle, my arm, nothing seems to work." Nahel nodded and gestured for him to follow her inside. The cabin was simple but clean. Herbs hung from the ceiling, drying in bundles. Small jars of powders and oils lined the shelves. The smell was earthy and strong, a mix of sage, cedar, and something sweet he couldn't quite identify. "Sit down," she said, pointing to a wooden chair by the fire. "I'll take a look at your injuries." Tom reluctantly lowered himself onto the chair, wincing as his ankle protested. He had expected some strange ritual or incantation, maybe even a lecture on superstition. Instead, Nahel moved quietly, almost like she was reading his body before touching it. She examined his ankle first, her hands moving carefully, pressing gently around the swelling. "It's not broken," she said, her voice calm, "but it's badly sprained. And there's inflammation." She then turned to his arm, brushing her fingers over the wound. Tom flinched slightly at her touch, surprised by the cool, steady pressure. "You've tried to clean this yourself," she said, "but it's still tender. That's normal. The body needs time, but it also needs guidance." Tom's skepticism grew. "Guidance? What do you mean?" Nahel looked at him with quiet patience. The body can heal itself, but sometimes it forgets the way. I help it remember." He didn't understand what she meant, but there was something in her tone that made him feel safe, as if she truly knew what she was doing. He realized that for the first time in days, he felt a small flicker of hope. Nahel worked slowly, mixing powders and oils in small bowls. She applied a warm paste to his ankle, wrapping it gently with strips of cloth. When she touched his arm, he felt a strange tingling sensation, not painful but unusual. He shifted uncomfortably. "You might feel warmth," she said, "or a light pressure. That's normal." Tom nodded silently. He wasn't sure whether to believe in this, but he felt too exhausted to argue. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to relax slightly. As she worked, Nahel spoke quietly about the land, the desert, and the plants that grew wild around them. She explained how each plant had a purpose, a life, and a lesson to teach. Tom listened, surprised at how much he enjoyed her stories. It was different from the life he knew on the ranch, different from the endless routines of checking fences, feeding cattle, and repairing barns. Hours passed. The sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Tom's ankle felt less swollen, his arm less throbbing. He couldn't explain why, but he felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his chest as well. Nahel looked at him and smiled. "You're doing well," she said. "The body is strong, it just needed a little help to remember itself." Tom nodded slowly, still cautious but strangely moved. "Thank you," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I only guided you. Your body did the work." He stood slowly, testing his ankle. It hurt less than before, not completely healed but better. He felt a flicker of disbelief mixed with gratitude. Before he left, Nahel gave him a small pouch of dried herbs. "Use these," she said. "They will help keep the pain down and aid healing." Tom nodded, pocketing the pouch. He mounted his horse, glancing back at her cabin. There was something about her, something calm and steady, that he couldn't forget. For the first time, he realized that perhaps there were ways to heal that he had never considered, ways beyond medicine, beyond the routines of ranch life. As he rode back toward the ranch, the sun dipping below the horizon, Tom felt a strange mix of relief and curiosity. He didn't fully understand what had just happened, but he knew one thing. Meeting Nahel had changed something inside him. The desert didn't feel so harsh anymore. The pain didn't feel so unbearable. For the first time in days, he believed that perhaps he could recover, not just in body but in spirit as well. And somewhere deep down, he felt that this was only the beginning of a story he didn't yet understand. A story that had just begun in the quiet, sun-baked land of Arizona, with a healer who could touch not just the skin, but the heart itself. After that first visit to Nahel's cabin, Tom Reynolds couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. He rode back to his ranch slowly, feeling the desert wind on his face and noticing details he had missed before. The soft rustle of sage in the breeze, the distant cry of a hawk, the golden light touching the rocky hills. Something about that quiet place and about Nahel herself had left a mark he couldn't ignore. Back at the ranch, life continued as usual, but Tom felt different. He worked with the cattle, fixed fences, and repaired barns, but his mind kept returning to her cabin in the desert. At first, he told himself it was curiosity, nothing more. But he couldn't deny the small, steady relief in his ankle and the lessened pain in his arm. He tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but deep down, he knew something had changed. By the third day, the pain had lessened further, but there was still stiffness in his ankle and tenderness in his arm. He remembered the pouch of dried herbs Nahel had given him and decided to follow her instructions. Each morning, he steeped the herbs in hot water, inhaling their earthy aroma before drinking the warm liquid. To his surprise, it soothed not just his physical pain but also a restless feeling in his chest. There was a calmness he hadn't felt in a long time. He realized he couldn't handle this healing alone. With a mixture of reluctance and curiosity, he decided to return to Nahel's cabin. He had never been one to ask for help, but this felt different. He didn't want to admit it to himself, but he trusted her in a way that he didn't trust anyone else. The next morning, Tom saddled his horse and rode toward the desert. The air was crisp, and the sun cast long shadows over the rocks and cacti. He noticed the colors of the desert more clearly now: the reds, oranges, and yellows of the soil, the deep green of the cacti, and the golden light on the horizon. It was as if he had been so focused on his pain that he had forgotten to see the beauty around him. When he reached Nahel's cabin, she was already outside, gathering herbs in a small basket. She looked up and smiled at him, a warm, welcoming smile that made him feel immediately at ease. "Good morning, Tom," she said softly. "You've returned." Yes," he replied, feeling slightly awkward. "I thought maybe you could help me some more." Nahel nodded. "Of course, come inside and we'll see what we can do." Tom followed her into the cabin. The smell of herbs and burning sage filled the air, comforting and familiar now. The small wooden room seemed even calmer than before, as if it had a life of its own. Nahel motioned for him to sit on a mat near the floor. She had prepared a small bowl of warm water and soft cloths. "First," she said, "we will clean your wound and check your ankle." Tom watched as she worked. Her hands moved with a quiet confidence, gentle but precise. She cleaned his arm, applying a soothing herbal paste to the wound. When she touched his ankle, he felt a warmth that spread through the muscles and tendons, easing the stiffness and soreness. "You are improving," Nahel said. "Your body is responding well." "But healing is not just about the skin. It is about the mind and the spirit as well," Tom frowned. "The mind and spirit." "Yes," she said. "Pain is not always physical. Sometimes it is the worry, the fear, or the anger that stops the body from healing." He thought about the long months he had spent working alone, the endless responsibilities, and the pressure to prove himself as a cowboy. He had been so focused on surviving that he had ignored how exhausted he felt inside. Nahel continued her work, guiding him through exercises to stretch his ankle and massage the muscles. Her touch was steady, and her voice calm, almost musical. She explained each movement, encouraging him to listen to his body and to notice how it felt. "Feel the energy in your body," she said softly. "Let it move freely. Do not fight it." Tom followed her instructions, surprised at how much relief he felt. He had never paid attention to his body in this way before, and it felt strange but comforting. He realized that her methods were not magic or superstition. They were understanding, patience, and care. As the afternoon passed, Nahel shared stories about the plants she used and the lessons she had learned from the land. She spoke of resilience, patience, and the importance of living in harmony with nature. Tom listened intently, fascinated by her knowledge and the calm wisdom in her voice. At one point, she led him outside to a small garden near the cabin. The garden was simple but vibrant, filled with medicinal plants and herbs. She pointed to each plant, explaining its use and the way it helped the body and spirit. Tom found himself amazed at how much he had taken the natural world for granted. "You see," Nahel said, "everything has a purpose. Even the smallest plant can heal if you know how to use it." Tom nodded slowly. He had always thought of the desert as harsh and unforgiving, but here in her presence it felt alive and nurturing. As the sun began to set, Nahel prepared a simple meal of corn, beans, and fresh herbs. They ate in silence for a while, enjoying the quiet of the desert. Tom felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He realized that this was more than healing. It was learning to slow down, to observe, and to connect with life in a way he had forgotten. After the meal, Nahel guided him through a gentle ritual to end the day. She asked him to sit quietly, close his eyes, and focus on his breathing. She placed her hands lightly on his shoulders and guided him to release tension with each exhale. Tom felt a warmth spreading through his body, a gentle sense of release that went beyond his muscles and bones. "You are stronger than you know," she said. "Your body remembers how to heal. You only need to trust it." Tom opened his eyes and looked at her. He wanted to say something, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he nodded, understanding more than he could express. Before leaving that evening, Nahel handed him another small pouch of herbs. "These will help with your ankle and your sleep," she explained. "Use them with care and remember what we practiced today." Tom mounted his horse and began the ride back to the ranch. The sky was painted in shades of pink, orange, and purple, and the desert seemed more alive than ever. His ankle felt lighter, his arm less painful, and his mind calmer. He realized that he looked forward to returning, not just for healing, but for the quiet lessons and the sense of connection he found with Nahel and the land. That night, Tom sat by the fire in his small cabin, sipping a warm herbal drink and thinking about the day. He realized that he had begun to trust someone again, to open his mind to a way of life he had never known. It was not easy for him, but it felt right. He thought about Nahel's words. The body remembers, the mind and spirit must heal too. For the first time in a long time, Tom felt hope, not just for his recovery, but for a new understanding of life. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that he still had pain to overcome and lessons to learn. But he also knew that he had found a guide, someone who could help him navigate not just the desert, but the inner struggles he had carried for years. And as he drifted to sleep that night, he felt a quiet determination growing within him. He was ready to continue this journey, to trust in the process, and to learn from someone who could heal more than just the body, someone who could touch the heart and soul with her hands, her wisdom and her care. Days passed after Tom's second visit to Nahel, and life at the ranch slowly returned to its usual rhythm. The cattle needed tending, fences needed mending, and chores seemed endless. Yet, Tom noticed a difference in himself. He could walk without wincing from pain, and the constant ache in his arm had eased. But while his body was improving, his mind felt restless. He kept thinking about Nahel, about the way she moved with quiet confidence, how her hands seemed to guide healing without force, and how she spoke about the desert, the plants, and the energy of the body. He admired her knowledge and patience, yet he felt uneasy. He had always been self-reliant, proud of managing his ranch and surviving the hardships of cowboy life. To rely on someone else, especially a healer with methods he didn't fully understand, challenged his pride. One morning, after feeding the cattle, Tom set out again toward Nahel's cabin. The sun was just rising, painting the desert with soft, golden light. His horse walked slowly, as if sensing the tension in its rider. Tom thought about what he wanted to say to Nahel. He wanted answers. He wanted to understand how her hands, her herbs, and her quiet guidance could ease pain that he had thought only medicine could touch. When he arrived at the cabin, Nahel greeted him with her calm smile. "Good morning, Tom," she said. "You returned sooner than I expected." I need more help," Tom admitted, his voice low. "My ankle is better and my arm too, but I feel restless. I don't understand why." Nahel nodded knowingly. "The body heals quickly, but the mind and spirit take time. They carry memories, fears, and doubts. That restlessness is part of your journey," Tom frowned. "I don't know if I believe in all of that." "That is all right," she said gently. "Belief is not needed to feel change. It is your willingness to pay attention that matters." He followed her inside, noticing again the comforting smells of herbs and sage. Nahel motioned for him to sit near the floor. She began with gentle stretching exercises for his ankle, guiding him to move slowly, noticing each sensation. Her hands pressed lightly on his muscles, easing tension, while her words encouraged him to focus on his breathing. "You are tensing too much," she said softly. "Relax. Pain is easier when you allow the body to flow naturally." Tom tried to follow her instructions, but old habits were hard to break. He tensed his jaw, gripped the floor with his hands, and resisted the gentle movements. After a few minutes, he sighed in frustration. "I can't do this," he admitted. "I've never been like this before. I'm not used to stopping and feeling." Nahel smiled, not with judgment but with understanding. "It is not easy to change habits that have lasted a lifetime, but the body listens to the mind and the mind listens to the heart. You must be patient with yourself." Her words struck something inside him. He had spent so long proving his strength through hard work and stubbornness that he had forgotten to listen, to himself, to his body, and even to others. They continued working slowly through the day. Nahel guided him in massages, stretching, and breathing exercises. She also showed him more about the plants she used, the leaves, roots, and flowers that had been passed down through generations in her community. Tom observed quietly, fascinated by the way she explained the connection between the body and nature. "You see," she said, holding a small green leaf, "this plant helps the muscles relax, but it also reminds us that life moves in cycles. Healing is not instant, it is gradual like the growth of a plant." Tom listened, impressed by her knowledge but still skeptical. He had lived in the desert all his life, but he had never seen it in this way. To him, the desert had been a harsh place, demanding strength and endurance. Now, through Nahel's eyes, it seemed alive, connected, and full of lessons. By late afternoon, they sat outside the cabin. The sun was warm, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage across the desert. Tom found himself relaxing more than he had in months. He had thought that healing was only about the body, but now he realized there was something deeper at work. Nahel spoke softly. "You carry more than just injuries. You carry fear, doubt, and past experiences. They must be acknowledged for true healing to occur." Tom frowned, unsure how to respond. He had spent so long keeping his emotions buried, thinking that strength meant hiding weakness. Yet as he watched her quietly and felt the calm of the desert, he sensed that she understood him better than anyone ever had. I don't know if I can do that," he admitted reluctantly. "You can," she replied firmly but kindly. "It is not about force. It is about noticing, accepting, and allowing yourself to feel. That is a different kind of strength." For the first time in years, Tom let himself sit in silence, breathing deeply and paying attention to his thoughts. He thought about the fall from his horse, the long nights of pain, and the stubbornness that had kept him from seeking help sooner. He realized that his restlessness was not just about his injuries, it was about the life he had been living. Over the next few hours, Nahel guided him through gentle touch and massage. Her hands moved over his body with a quiet confidence that seemed to awaken something deep inside him. Tom felt a warmth spreading through his muscles, a sensation he had never experienced before. It was not just physical comfort, it was a release, as if tension and fear were being carried away with each motion. At one point, she asked him to close his eyes and focus on the sensations. "Notice the warmth in your body," she said. "Notice the movement of energy. It is subtle, but it is real. You are healing not just the body, but the mind." Tom followed her instructions, breathing deeply and slowly. At first, it felt awkward, but gradually he felt a sense of lightness he hadn't known in years. His muscles relaxed, his mind became quieter, and a small smile crept onto his face. "You are improving," Nahel said softly. "Do you feel it?" Tom nodded. "Yes, I do." That evening, Nahel prepared a simple meal of corn, beans, and herbs. They ate in companionable silence, the desert around them quiet and calm. Tom noticed that he was thinking less about his pain and more about the lessons he was learning. He realized that his restlessness had been a teacher, guiding him toward understanding, patience, and trust. After the meal, Nahel guided him in another ritual, asking him to place his hands on his own body, feeling warmth and energy flow through him. Tom followed her carefully, noticing sensations he had never paid attention to before. He felt the tightness in his muscles slowly release and the tension in his chest ease. "You are learning to listen," she said. "That is the hardest part for many people. Strength is not always shown in action. Sometimes it is shown in awareness, patience, and acceptance." Tom felt a quiet respect for her growing inside him. He had thought of himself as strong and capable, but he realized that true strength also included humility, trust, and openness. As the sky turned pink and orange with the setting sun, Tom mounted his horse to ride back to the ranch. His ankle was strong, his arm was healing, and his mind felt lighter than it had in years. He thought about Nahel's words, the calm wisdom in her presence and the quiet power of her hands. He realized that healing was not a simple process. It was not just about treating injuries. It was about facing fear, learning patience, and trusting oneself. And he knew that his journey was far from over. That night, sitting by the fire in his small cabin, Tom reflected on the day. He thought about the lessons of the desert, the plants, and the gentle hands that had guided him. He realized that he had begun to see the world differently, appreciating the quiet strength in nature and in people. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of possibility. The pain, the restlessness, and the doubts were not enemies. They were guides, showing him the way to healing and understanding. And deep inside, he knew that Nahel's hands had not just touched his skin. They had touched his heart, awakening a sense of trust, courage, and hope that he had almost forgotten. Tom finally closed his eyes and drifted into sleep, feeling a quiet determination to continue this journey. He was ready to face the challenges ahead, to learn more from Nahel, and to embrace the healing that was happening not only in his body but in his mind and spirit. Over the next few weeks, Tom Reynolds noticed changes he had never expected. His ankle, once stiff and painful, now moved easily, and the wound on his arm had healed more completely than he thought possible. Yet, what surprised him the most was not just the physical improvement, it was the change he felt inside. He felt calmer, more patient, and strangely lighter, as if a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying had finally been lifted. Each morning, he rose early, completing his chores with a new rhythm. The work was still hard, fencing, herding, and tending to the cattle, but he no longer felt exhausted after each day. Instead, he noticed small details: the way the sun reflected off the rocks, the pattern of shadows across the desert, the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. He realized he was seeing the world with new eyes, noticing beauty and connection where he had once seen only work and struggle. Tom continued to visit Nahel regularly. Each visit brought new lessons. She introduced him to deeper practices of healing, gentle stretches that moved energy through his body, meditative breathing that quieted his mind, and herbal remedies that strengthened him from the inside out. She taught him to prepare poultices and teas, explaining which plants helped ease soreness, calm nerves, and promote rest. Tom listened carefully, absorbing every word. It fascinated him that the desert, which he had always seen as harsh and unforgiving, contained remedies for pain and lessons for life itself. One afternoon, as they worked together in her small garden, Nahel looked up and said, "You have grown stronger, Tom. Not just your body, but your spirit. You are learning to trust." Tom nodded, feeling a sense of pride he had not allowed himself to feel in years. "I do feel better," he admitted. "Not just my arm and ankle, I feel lighter." "That is because you are learning to let go," Nahel said. "Pain and worry have less power when the mind is calm and the body is aware. Healing comes not only from touch or herbs but from understanding yourself." Tom looked at her, realizing the truth in her words. He had spent years living alone, relying only on himself, believing that independence meant strength. But he had learned something new. Strength could also come from openness, from trust, and from allowing others to guide you when needed. As the days passed, Tom became more involved in Nahel's daily work. He helped gather herbs, prepare remedies, and care for others in the community who sought her guidance. At first, he had felt awkward and out of place, unsure if he could understand her ways. But gradually, he found that his hands, once rough and clumsy from years of ranch work, could be gentle and precise. He felt proud to contribute, realizing that helping others gave him a sense of purpose beyond his own recovery. One evening, while watching the sun sink behind the rocky hills, Tom reflected on how far he had come. Not long ago, he had been in pain, restless, and doubtful, unsure if he could trust anyone or even himself. Now he felt a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with being a cowboy or managing a ranch. It was a calm assurance that he could face challenges with patience and clarity. Nahel watched him thoughtfully. "You are learning balance," she said. "Strength without patience can lead to harm. Patience without strength can lead to weakness. True healing finds the middle path." Tom smiled, feeling the truth of her words. He realized that his journey was about more than physical recovery. It was about finding harmony within himself, balancing his strength and patience, his independence and his ability to trust. Over time, Tom also noticed changes in his relationships. He became more patient with his neighbors, more understanding with the ranch hands, and more attentive to the needs of his animals. He found himself listening more carefully, speaking less hastily, and acting with intention. Even his old friends noticed a difference. Where once he had been quick to anger or frustration, he now approached challenges with calm determination. One morning, while preparing for another visit to Nahel's cabin, Tom encountered a young ranch hand struggling to lift a heavy bale of hay. Without thinking, Tom stepped forward to help, guiding the young man with gentle but firm instructions. He realized he was no longer just focused on his own needs. He could help others without hesitation, using the patience and awareness he had learned from Nahel. At the cabin, Nahel greeted him warmly. "You are growing," she said, "not just in healing but in understanding. The work we do touches more than one person. Healing spreads." Tom nodded. He felt a sense of gratitude, not only for his own recovery, but for the lessons he had learned and the chance to share them with others. He had begun to see that healing was not a solitary process. It was a connection between people, nature, and the self. During one of their sessions, Nahel guided Tom through a deeper practice. She asked him to lie down, close his eyes, and focus on the flow of energy in his body. Her hands moved lightly over his muscles, encouraging circulation and awareness. Tom felt warmth spreading through his limbs, a gentle tingling that was both comforting and invigorating. "You are learning to listen to your body," Nahel said softly. "Every ache, every tightness, every warmth tells a story. Pay attention and you will understand yourself better." Tom concentrated, realizing how much he had ignored his body for years. He had worked through pain, pushed himself too hard, and ignored signs that he needed rest. Now, with Nahel's guidance, he was learning to respect his own limits and to honor his body's signals. As the days turned into weeks, Tom also began to understand the deeper wisdom of Nahel's methods. Healing was not just about relieving pain. It was about cultivating awareness, compassion, and balance. He realized that he had been holding onto old patterns of fear, stubbornness, and impatience, and that these patterns had slowed his recovery in more ways than one. One afternoon, after a long session, Nahel handed him a small bundle of herbs. "These will help maintain your strength," she explained. "But remember, they are only a tool. The true healing comes from what you carry inside." Tom looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. He realized that she was teaching him not just to heal, but to grow, to become more aware, more patient, and more compassionate. He felt a deep respect for her wisdom and a sense of responsibility to apply what he had learned. By now, Tom had begun to teach others what he had learned. He showed the young ranch hands how to stretch their muscles, care for minor injuries, and pay attention to their bodies. He shared simple herbal remedies for soreness and fatigue, always careful to explain the importance of observation and care. Slowly, He began to see that the lessons he had learned with Nahel could benefit his entire community. One evening, as the sun set in a fiery display of red and gold, Tom rode back to the ranch from Nahel's cabin. His heart felt light, his body strong, and his mind at ease. He realized that he had transformed in ways he could not have imagined. He was no longer just a man recovering from injury. He was a man learning to live with awareness, patience, and connection. Sitting by the fire that night, Tom thought about the journey he had undertaken. It had begun with pain and skepticism, but it had grown into something much greater. He had discovered the power of trust, the importance of patience, and the strength that comes from awareness and compassion. He knew that the path of healing was ongoing, but he felt ready to walk it with confidence and humility. Tom closed his eyes, feeling gratitude for the lessons, the guidance, and the quiet wisdom of Nahel. He understood now that healing was not just about returning to a former state. It was about growing into a stronger, wiser, and more balanced version of himself. He felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the tools, the knowledge, and the inner strength to continue his journey. And somewhere deep inside, he felt a quiet joy, knowing that the hands that had guided him, the wisdom that had shaped him, and the connection he had forged with the land and people around him would stay with him forever. Tom Reynolds woke early that morning with a sense of purpose. The sun was just beginning to rise over the desert hills, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. He stretched his legs and arms, noting the ease with which his body moved. His ankle no longer ached, his arm was fully healed, and his muscles felt strong and flexible. More importantly, he felt a quiet confidence and inner calm that he had never known before. For weeks, he had been visiting Nahel, learning not just how to heal his injuries, but how to listen to his body, observe his mind, and understand his spirit. Each visit had taught him patience, awareness, and trust. Each touch, each lesson, and each herbal remedy had guided him to discover a new strength, one that was gentle, thoughtful, and enduring. That morning, Tom mounted his horse and rode toward Nahel's cabin, carrying with him a basket of freshly baked bread and herbs he had prepared himself. He wanted to thank her properly, to show her that her teachings had made a lasting difference in his life. As he approached, he noticed the cabin bathed in morning light, smoke curling softly from the chimney, and the desert around it alive with the sounds of birds and wind. Nahel greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning, Tom. You look well," she said. "I feel well," he replied, returning her smile. "Thanks to you, I feel stronger than I have in years, not just in my body but in my mind and heart." Nahel's eyes twinkled with quiet approval. "You have done the work yourself. I only guided you." Tom shook his head. "You guided me, yes, but that guidance changed everything. You showed me how to trust, how to listen, how to care, not just for my body but for myself and others." They spent the morning together in the garden, tending herbs, preparing poultices, and talking quietly. Tom had begun to understand the deep wisdom in Nahel's teachings, the connection between the land, the body, and the spirit. He realized that true strength was not measured by toughness or endurance alone, but by patience, awareness, and the ability to care for oneself and others. As they worked, Nahel shared stories of her people, the Apache traditions, and the lessons of the land. Tom listened intently, fascinated by the way history, culture, and nature intertwined in her teachings. He realized that he had learned more than healing techniques. He had learned a new way of seeing the world, a deeper appreciation for life, and for the quiet strength of people who lived in harmony with it. By afternoon, Tom decided it was time to return to his ranch. His body was healed, but he also felt ready to share the lessons he had learned. Nahel gave him a small bundle of herbs, carefully wrapped in cloth. "These will help maintain your health," she said. "But remember, the true strength comes from what you carry inside." Tom nodded, holding the bundle with care. "I understand," he said, and I will remember, I promise." The ride back to the ranch was different from any he had taken before. The desert no longer felt harsh and unforgiving. The colors were richer, the sounds sharper, and the air seemed alive with possibility. Tom noticed the patterns of light and shadow across the rocks, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the distant call of animals. He felt connected to the land, to the animals, and to himself in a way he had never experienced. When he arrived at the ranch, the cattle were calm, and the ranch hands were busy with their chores. Tom greeted them with a smile, feeling a warmth he had not felt before. He realized that his journey with Nahel had changed the way he interacted with others. He was calmer, more patient, and more aware of the needs of those around him. Over the next days, Tom began to share what he had learned. He showed the ranch hands simple exercises to ease sore muscles, taught them about the herbs and remedies that Nahel had introduced him to, and encouraged them to pay attention to their bodies and minds. At first, some were skeptical, but as they saw the results, they began to trust his guidance. Even his neighbors noticed a change in him. Where once he had been quick to frustration or anger, he now approached challenges with calm determination. Tom realized that his healing had not only affected his body, but had also influenced the people around him. He felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the lessons he had learned were spreading, helping others live more mindful and balanced lives. One afternoon, as he worked in the barn, a young ranch hand approached him, holding a scraped knee. Tom guided him gently, cleaning the wound, applying an herbal ointment, and explaining the importance of care and attention. The boy watched him carefully, listening to every word. Tom realized that this was exactly what Nahel had been teaching him, not just to heal himself, but to share that healing with others. As evening approached, Tom rode once more toward Nahel's cabin. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of orange, red, and purple, reflecting in the quiet desert. He felt a deep sense of gratitude as he approached, thinking of all the lessons she had taught him. Nahel greeted him with her calm smile. "You return again," she said. "Yes," Tom replied. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for healing me, but for teaching me to live differently, to see differently, and to understand myself." Nahel nodded. "You have learned much, Tom, but remember, learning never ends. Each day is a chance to grow, to observe, and to care." They sat together quietly, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Tom felt a sense of peace and completeness. He had been transformed, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. He realized that the journey of healing was ongoing, but he now possessed the wisdom, patience, and strength to continue it on his own. Before leaving that evening, Tom handed Nahel a small gift, a hand-carved wooden box he had made, filled with herbs, dried flowers, and a note expressing his gratitude. "This is for you," he said, "to thank you for everything." Nahel accepted the gift with grace, her eyes warm. "Thank you, Tom. May your journey continue with balance and strength." Riding back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Tom felt a sense of joy and fulfillment that he had never known. The desert seemed alive with possibility, and he understood that healing was not just a return to a previous state, but a growth into something stronger, wiser, and more connected. In the days that followed, Tom continued his work at the ranch with renewed energy and awareness. He shared his knowledge, cared for his animals with attentiveness, and interacted with others with patience and understanding. He knew that Nahel's guidance would always be with him, a quiet strength within that would shape his actions, thoughts, and relationships. The story of his healing spread quietly among neighbors and friends. They noticed the change in him and asked about his recovery. Tom spoke openly, without exaggeration, explaining the lessons he had learned from Nahel, the importance of listening to the body, the value of patience, and the wisdom of nature. People were inspired, not only by the recovery itself, but by the deeper understanding and respect he carried for life, others, and himself. Weeks later, as Tom stood on a hill overlooking his ranch, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had begun with pain and uncertainty, but it had led him to a deeper understanding of strength, healing, and connection. He realized that the hands that had guided him, Nahal's hands, had done more than heal his injuries. They had touched his spirit, awakening patience, trust, and awareness that would remain with him forever. Tom smiled as he thought of the Apache woman who had healed him, not just with her hands on his skin, but with her wisdom, her care, and her presence. He knew that her teachings would continue to guide him, helping him live a life that was stronger, kinder, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. As the sun set behind the desert hills, casting long shadows across the land, Tom felt a quiet joy. He had been transformed, healed, and guided toward a deeper understanding of life. And he knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue, one step at a time, with the lessons of patience, trust, and care leading the way. He rode back toward the ranch, feeling the wind on his face, the strength in his body, and the calm in his heart. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly whole. And in that moment, he understood that true healing was not just about the body. It was about the mind, the spirit, and the connections we make along the way.